Mr. Hutchings, on Sunday, the Newport Beach, Laguna Beach Daily Pilot, which is a subsidiary of the LA Times, it's on their website, did an article about 5 cities in Orange County and how they're trying to deal with this ever-growing pension problem. And their solution is, hey, let's pay more. Let's just try and pay down this unfunded liability and start making contributions like we should.
Right.
But not all can do that, and my cities are scrambling to figure out, even how to make the payment, but then try to find a little extra. So that was 5 cities. It was Fountain Valley, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, all trying to chip in a little more. I'm just curious, how many of your member cities are taking similar approaches?
I don't have a specific figure for you. One of the things that we are encouraging our cities with regards to best practices is not only trying to prepay your unfunded liability, but the challenge, and even inherently with prepaying your unfunded liability, is when you prepay and during the, and Mr. Trando spoke about the ALM cycle, the asset allocation cycle, where they look at all the factors and they it's been determined that people live longer, and the market assumptions the goalpost sort of gets moved because if you prepay a certain amount of money based on these actuarial assumptions, and then when the new ALM cycle comes out and says, wait, people are living longer, that means you owe more. That money that you prepay vanishes, essentially. I mean, that's the way our cities see it. And so what we have been advising cities to do is establish a 115 trust where they can invest money into a trust account. And again, they have to have the money to invest, but instead of necessarily prepaying directly, I think some cities, and I believe someone from one of the special districts will allude to this, their intent was to save up enough in a 115 trust to pay the entire amount to get out of CalPERS, because when you prepay a significant amount and those actuaries are changed, it's sort of like, well, thank you for the $6 million prepayment. You actually owe us $12 million because you're not completely out of the fund. And so we are advising our cities on a variety of best practices that fit within the confines of current law.
So has Section 115 been discussed earlier in this hearing? No. So maybe you should. That's an Internal Revenue Code Section 115 trust. Could you explain that?
Correct. And so a 115 trust is an option that a local agency can enter into that is established through the IRS that allows a local agency to contribute funds to a protected trust. It must be then applied to CalPERS eventually. It cannot be withdrawn for any other purposes, and I think there are some rare occasions in case of an emergency or something of that nature. But essentially, what you do is you take a budget surplus at the end of the year and you would throw into this 115 trust with the intent to pay down your unfunded liability. Now, some cities are using it as they call it a pension stabilization fund. So if the market jumps, or I'm sorry, if the market dips and rates go up, they've got some money in a pool here to sustain their level of funding. But other cities are using it that are cities or other localities that are a little bit more fiscally sound are saving up that money to then do one lump sum payment to exit out of the system because of the volatility with CalPERS.
So a city and a municipality, they don't pay income tax. So why would you need to have a Section 115 trust fund? What is the genesis of? And again, I'm not an actuary and I'm not an accountant, but from the best of my understanding is these are protected trust funds that were dedicated to pay down your CalPERS liability. So you were able to throw money into a trust, which is then invested on and actually makes a market return. And so you can actually, through compounding and over time, you can grow that trust through investing. It isn't just putting the money under the mattress. You're actually investing those funds and making money out of that fund. And when you have that amount of money, you throw it over to your unfunded liabilities. So then, would you be able then to reflect it as an expense item on your budget? Is that what we're doing?
You can yes, you can.
As opposed to saying it's a cash.
Correct. It is an expense item on the budget. However, it is not reflected on the GASB report, and so that's one of the hiccups. But I think some cities are willing to take that hit, saying, well, our GASB unfunded liability is this much money, but we have this much set aside in a trust that must be dedicated to CalPERS. So they use that usually in a footnote of their report to offset that unfunded liability.
And what can you invest it in?
I wouldn't want to speak to that.
Okay, but so if it's just in a money market fund, you're not really making a lot of money then.
I know that I do know that companies that establish those trusts have different levels of investment risk that you're willing to take, and
so there's a vendor market out there to help you with your 150.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have one more question. What can cities do, if anything, to help minimize disruptions in contracts with CalPERS, and in particular when it involves creating a JPA that contracts with the system?
That's an excellent question. So, when cities establish their JPAs under the current government code section 6508.1, as you all know, gives within that language gives those local agencies, and again, we do these with the state as well, and county special districts, all of us. But when we activate that section of the government code, it does give the governing body the ability to either take on the liability or not take on the liability if that joint powers authority states so in their origination documents. I would imagine that it would not be in our best interest to enter into a JPA knowing we're going to have employees and then simply dissolve that JPA. Under current law, when the JPA was established in 1979, I don't know if that was taken into consideration as far as the growth of that JPA. I can tell you that our cities utilize JPAs. One of the examples I was given from one of my city managers with after SB1 and the allocation of these funds, you're going to have transportation projects that go across city lines and county lines, and so you need to establish some of these JPAs to administer these funds to fix our roads. So I would imagine that if there was, as CalPERS has suggested in their presentation about joint and several liability, it's something that we would definitely need to consider before entering a JPA on an ongoing basis at this point.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, members? Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hutchings, you've already had 3 members that have filed for Chapter 9, and one just kind of got out of it just the last week or two, or out of bankruptcy court anyway. But cities are required to file a notice of financial distress if they want to consider filing for Chapter 9. I'm just wondering, not naming any names, but are cities coming to you saying, "Hey, we are this close. We are really having a tough time making it work"? When
Senator, without naming specific names, there are members out there of mine that when they look at the next 5 to 7 years, seeing their employer contributions quadruple, their unfunded liabilities quintuple, they do not see a way out. I have one city in particular who has stated that in the next 5 years, based on market assumptions and what they had been told from CalPERS what they're going to have to pay, the option is to either file for bankruptcy or close down the library, eliminate 2 police beats, close down a fire station, eliminate their river cleanup, eliminate a significant amount of services, or file for bankruptcy. So this is something that we are very fearful of, that in the next 5 to 10 years, we believe there will be agencies that will have to file for bankruptcy and have to restructure their debt somehow.
The next panel deals with counties, and I was a county supervisor before coming here. And because of the VLF takeaway back in 2011 with SB 89 by Governor Brown, trailer bill, those 4 cities were looking at not bankruptcy, but disincorporating, because they had just incorporated in 2004. So how many of your members have discussed disincorporating?
To my
as
knowledge,
opposed to Chapter 9? Because it might be cheaper just to.
Correct. I have heard the bankruptcy, sort of the thoughts on bankruptcy, but I have yet to hear a city that's considering disincorporating it this time.
Thank you.